Okay, so was it cold-blooded greed or a desperate act of self-defense? That's the question that's been swirling around the Menendez murders for decades. This case was an absolute firestorm, legally, culturally, and it's still just as controversial today. We're going to dive into how this story of Beverly Hills wealth and privilege completely exploded into one of the most polarizing criminal cases in modern history.
And it all kicks off with this frantic 911 call. On the night of August 20th, 1989, you get a hysterical Lyle Menendez on the line, screaming, "Someone killed my parents." He claimed he just walked in and found their bodies in the family's massive Beverly Hills mansion. And that single phone call, it was the start of a saga filled with wealth, dark secrets, and just, incredible violence that has kept people talking for over 30 years.
So when the police get to that mansion, what they walk into is, well, it's a scene of just pure carnage. The level of violence was so extreme, people were describing it like something straight out of a mob hit. I mean, it shocked even the most veteran investigators there.
And the brutality, it was just staggering. Jose and Kitty Menendez weren't just shot, they were obliterated. We're talking 12-gauge shotguns. Jose was hit 6 times, including a final fatal shot to the back of his head. And Kitty, she was shot 10 times. And here's a truly chilling detail. The evidence showed that after the first round of shots, one of the killers actually had to reload just to fire that final shot into her face while she was trying to crawl away. Just unbelievable.
So right away, in the immediate aftermath, Lyle starts pointing the police in a specific direction. He's telling them it had to be a professional, mob-style hit, maybe something to do with his father's business. And honestly, given how over-the-top the crime scene was, it kind of made sense. It was a plausible theory, and the police definitely pursued it at first.
Yeah, but that whole mob theory, it didn't hold up for very long. Pretty quickly, suspicion started to shift away from some shadowy criminal underworld and started to focus squarely on the 2 sons who made that 911 call.
And the reason for that shift, well, it can pretty much be summed up by this number, $700,000. That's roughly how much money Lyle and Eric just burned through in the 6 months right after their parents died. They went on this massive spending spree that was, completely impossible for investigators to just ignore.
I mean, their behavior just didn't scream grief-stricken, Lyle goes out and buys a Porsche, 3 Rolexes, and even a Buffalo Wing restaurant. Eric hires a full-time tennis coach to fly around the world with him for tournaments. They ditched the family mansion, moved into these fancy adjoining condos, and were just living it up, taking trips to the Caribbean and London. For investigators, this was just red flag after red flag, pointing to a huge financial motive.
So, the big break in the case didn't come from some amazing detective work. Nope, it came from a therapy session. A really distraught Eric actually confesses the whole thing to his psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel. Then, Dr. Oziel starts taping his sessions with both brothers, which is a huge no-no, a massive breach of confidentiality, but it gets crazier. Oziel's mistress, a woman named Judalon Smith, finds out about the confession on these tapes, and when her relationship with the doctor goes south, she goes straight to the police. And just like that, her story leads directly to the brothers' arrests in March of 1990.
Okay, so now the brothers are arrested, and the stage is set for this epic courtroom battle that would become a total national obsession. You have 2 completely different stories about the Menendez family that are about to just collide. And the best part? The whole thing was going to be broadcast live for everyone to watch.
And really, the entire case boiled down to one single conflict. Was it greed or was it fear? The prosecution story was pretty simple. This was about greed. They painted the brothers as 2 spoiled rich kids who killed their parents to get their hands on a multi-million-dollar inheritance. But the defense, they came back with a totally different narrative. They said, no, this wasn't about greed at all. It was about fear. They argued this was a desperate act by 2 sons who had suffered a lifetime of absolutely horrific abuse.
So let's look at the prosecution's case. For them, the story was simple. It was cold-blooded murder. They laid out the evidence for premeditation. Point 1, the brothers bought the shotguns just days before the killings. Point 2, they had a cover-up story all ready to go, and they even may have erased their father's new will from a computer. And that brutal detail about reloading the shotgun for their mother, that screamed calculation. As for all the abuse claims, the prosecution argued that was just a desperate, made-up story they cooked up for their legal defense after they were caught.
But then, the defense came back with this absolutely shocking and horrifying story of their own.
They painted the father, Jose, as this cruel, perfectionist pedophile who had been sexually abusing both of his sons for years, and the mother, Kitty, they portrayed her as a mentally unstable alcoholic who enabled the abuse, who let it happen. The brothers testified that the night of the murders was the final straw. They claimed their father threatened to kill them if they ever told anyone the family secrets. That threat, the defense argued, plunged them into a state of pure terror where they felt it was kill or be killed.
So you have these two incredibly powerful, totally conflicting stories. And the impact was huge. After months and months of testimony, all of it live on court TV, which was a pretty new thing, both juries, because they had a separate one for each brother, were deadlocked. They couldn't decide. Some jurors completely bought the abuse defense, but others just saw pure greed. Since they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, the judge had no choice but to declare a mistrial.
Now, a mistrial doesn't mean it's over. It just means the prosecution has to try the whole case all over again. But for the second trial, things were going to be very, very different, and so was the final outcome.
So, when Lyle and Eric were retried in 1996, the whole vibe had changed. First, the new judge banned cameras from the courtroom, so that intense media circus was gone. But more importantly, he put some serious limits on the abuse testimony the defense was allowed to present. This time there was just one jury for both of them, and the verdict came back fast and it was decisive: guilty of first-degree murder.
And the sentence was about as harsh as it gets: life in prison without parole. Actually, they got 2 consecutive life sentences, one for each murder, plus another for conspiracy. It was basically designed to make absolutely sure they would die in prison. And for a long, long time, it really seemed like that was the end of the story. But, with a case this famous, is it ever really over? Decades after they were sentenced to life, a whole series of really stunning developments brought the Menendez case roaring right back into the public eye.
Yeah, so after decades of just nothing, failed appeals, the case took this wild turn in 2023. Some new evidence came to light after a former member of a boy band came forward alleging that he had also been abused by Jose Menendez. This was an absolute bombshell. It was enough for the LA District Attorney's Office to recommend that the brothers be resentenced. And believe it or not, in May of 2025, a judge actually changed their sentence to 50 years to life, which suddenly made them eligible for parole. But in the very first parole hearing they had in August 2025, they were denied. Just another crazy twist in this ongoing saga.
And so, here we are. After all the trials, the appeals, the media frenzy, and these brand new revelations, we're right back where we started. The central question is exactly the same as it was back in 1989. Was this a calculated crime for money, or was it a desperate escape from a lifetime of torture? Were they cold-blooded killers, or were they traumatized victims who finally snapped? Where you land on that question, well, that's what makes this case so haunting and why we're still talking about it today.